but I can't ask Aristotle a question. I mean, I can, but I won't get an answer. And so my hope is that in our lifetimes, we can make a tool of a new kind, of an interactive kind. And when I look at the personal computer, we're, as you know, living in the wake of the last revolution, which was a new source of free energy. And that was the free energy of petrochemicals, right? And it completely transformed society, and we're products of this petrochemical revolution, which is we're still living in the wake of today. We are now entering another revolution of free energy. Macintosh, as you know, uses less power than a few of those light bulbs, and yet can save us a few hours a day or give us a whole new experience. And it's free intellectual energy. It's crude, very crude, but it's getting more refined year after year after year. And in our lifetimes, it should get very refined. And so my hope is someday, when the next Aristotle is alive, we can capture the underlying worldview of that Aristotle in a computer. And someday, some student will be able to not only read the words Aristotle wrote, but ask Aristotle a question and get an answer. And that's what I hope that we can do. So this is a beginning. I think that, as you know, right now the computer industry is in the tank. Personal computers, big computers, everything. And it's difficult. It's a difficult time. But I'm sure that Henry Ford had a few bad quarters back in the 1920s. And the automobile had a sort of historical imperative. It had, the minute it was invented, a sequence of events had to happen. The same is true with the personal computer. There is a tremendous momentum behind this. And I think that this year may be a delay. This year we may look back and say, well, 1985 was a slow year. But there is such momentum behind this that it will happen.
Good morning, everybody. You just heard Steve Jobs prophetically describing what we today call large language models. Now, this talk is about the problem of AI alignment, which is a problem caused by the momentum that Steve describes. Now, before I even define what AI alignment is, I want to provide enough background to really understand the problem. And to do that, I'm going to talk through a series of very small topics. So let's begin by discussing the first very small topic, which is all of human civilization, but specifically as measured through the preeminent technology of the day. So human civilization post the nomadic age begins with the agricultural age. We settled down to form the first farming communities, and it breaks down into many sub-ages, like the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Middle Ages, and so on. But ultimately, agriculture was the primary profession and technology of the day. And though it may shock you, this also encompasses times like the Roman Empire and the Renaissance as well. We tend to think of there being like musicians and painters and philosophers everywhere, but virtually everyone was a farmer, 85 to 90 people to farm enough food for 100 to live. And when people fought during the agricultural age, they fought with blades, they fought with bow and arrow and slings and spears, and they rode animals like horses into battle and beasts of burden like oxen to carry their war supplies. These are all farming implements. To this day, the visage of death is the reaper, which is used for wheat, and he's carrying a scythe or a sickle. These are all farming implements that date back thousands of years. Now, the invention of powered mechanical farming made it so that one person could farm enough food for 100 people to survive, and this was so profound that it led to an entirely new age of civilization, the mechanical age. And during this time, there were major shifts to the world economy, spearheaded by ideas like the assembly line, and the Industrial Revolution reshaped politics worldwide. And the weapons of the time were mechanical in nature, things like ships, airplanes, machine guns, tanks, ultimately culminating in nuclear weapons. And these were orders of magnitude more destructive than anything that came in the ages of civilization before it. And this lasted until the invention of the internet in the 1980s, when human civilization entered a new age, the information age. And again, there were major shifts to the world economy and politics. Virtually all money is now digital, and you can't show me a single government anywhere in the world whose bureaucracy is not completely run on computers. Now, in the 1990s to early 2000s, we saw the first traditional information weapons, things like viruses, electronic surveillance, state-sponsored attacker groups. There was Stuxnet, the virus that stopped the Iran nuclear program, ransomware, and things like that. But then came AI, its first versions of AI, and from it sprouted an entirely new type of product and human experience: social media. Social media at its core is an AI product. They leverage machine learning to understand our preferences so it can increase engagement and show us more relevant advertising. Now, in order to keep you scrolling on TikTok for as long as possible, the algorithms lean into what will keep you present. Fundamentally, this is a form of AI that's about curating the information that you see. And it was wildly successful. Most of the major tech companies are in some way using this type of AI to gather your data and sell it back to you in the form of ads. But this also led to a completely unforeseen revelation. See, the preeminent thinking up until this time was that sex sells and that sexuality led to the highest engagement numbers for a product. And while sex certainly does sell, what machine learning does is it has a way of identifying patterns that humans cannot. And it turns out that the emotion which gets humans to spend the most amount of time on your platform isn't sex, it's rage. Enragement equals engagement. AI taught human civilization something about itself that it didn't already know, or at least it didn't fully understand. The machine learning algorithms guiding the curation of information didn't miss this, and they're not controlled by human masters. It's not like Mark Zuckerberg is in there tweaking the system. The algorithms automatically lean into the numbers. And so these social media platforms, guided by these curation AIs, began to prioritize and circulate information that led to user rage. However, this drove up engagement so high that social media in general became a significant portion of the information that people see at all. And thus, the first AI-powered information weapons were born, and we deployed them against ourselves. Now, we all know the effects at this point. We're living them, right? From new cults like QAnon and 5G causes COVID, to the kids who want to look sexy on Instagram so they can get more likes. And though it's difficult to judge the number of lives lost, the negative effects of social media have impacted orders of magnitude more people than nuclear bombs ever did. And part of the problem is that when you say the words hostile AI, everyone's minds immediately go to robots in the streets shooting laser guns at people, right? And that's because for most people, their only model for what happens when an AI attacks is from Hollywood movies. But our actual robot technology still leaves a lot to be desired. Ah, yes, sally forth, my noble steed. Take me hence to the haberdashery, where I might regale myself in the finest accessories. Oh, yes, jolly good, quite right. Oh, my young little friend, you seem to have hit a little snag there. But don't worry, I have faith in you. To the haberdashery, I say. Right. So, robots fighting in the streets is not what AI looks like. Right. What hostile AI looks like is this.
Be part of our family. So if you could pray for us, we appreciate it. I love you guys. Bye. Come here. Come closer for the video. Come closer. Come closer. Come closer. Put your head right here. Come closer. Closer down. Put your head down here. Act like you're crying. Really quick.
I am crying.
Go like this.
No, Mom, I'm actually seriously crying.
No, I know, but go like this for the video. Go like this. Put one hand up. Go like this. No, go like this. Put your hand like this. But let them see your mouth. Let them see your mouth.
No, Mom, I'm actually crying.
Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me.
I'm actually crying.
I know. Look at me. Look at me. Look at the camera. Look at the camera. Okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's over. It's over. It's over.
Hostile AI is what creates the incentives for this type of behavior. She posted this by accident and still continues to be an influencer with hundreds of thousands of regular viewers. Both this mother and her son are victims, and we're ignoring the real effects of real AIs that are hostile right now. But why? Well, for that, let's look at our second really small topic, reality. And to understand this better, I want to look at an example from the agricultural age. I want to start by talking about the ancient Egyptian crocodile god Sobek. And you might be thinking, whoa, what the hell just happened? Let me explain. Ancient Egyptians lived near the Nile River, and the land at the time was mostly crocodile-infested swamps. They revered Sobek, their crocodile god, and believed that he could offer protection from the dangerous Nile crocodiles if only they could build temples of worship to him. Now, this religious devotion to construct these temples led the Egyptians to perform incredible feats of civil engineering, and they completely turned all of this unusable swampland into temples to Sobek, where the crocodiles were fed and the land was usable for farming. And inside these temples, there was actually an avatar of Sobek, which was an actual crocodile that they would feed, worship, and they keep a little crown on his head. And by worshiping Sobek, the Egyptians transformed a dangerous, crocodile-infested terrain into a holy and sacred ground upon which they continued to build their civilization. Sobek had come through for them, right? They were now protected from the crocodiles by worshiping him. So my question to you is, was the god Sobek real? Well, it was certainly real in the minds of the ancient Egyptians. And through that shared belief, Sobek's power was realized. Where there was once inhospitable swamps full of deadly crocodiles, there were now temples to Sobek and usable farmland. And anyone that lived in that time and thought to doubt Sobek's power could simply look around and see how he had transformed the land. This shared understanding between subjects of how the world works is called an intersubjective reality. Things like money, religion, governments, borders, all of them represent shared understandings that we ascribe power to. Money only works because we live in an intersubjective reality where money has value. And religious civilizations dominate human history because they have a much more unified purpose as a result of their shared perceptions of reality. King County does not exist except in our shared sense of reality. And if you point to the legal documents that define King County, you'll discover that even the law is a shared reality. Microsoft, as an entity, doesn't exist except in humanity's shared context. This is the definition of an intersubjective reality, a reality created only through the shared perception of multiple subjects. And it turns out many historians believe this may be humanity's greatest, if not only, superpower. So when you create an idea and establish it in the minds of others, we work collectively to make it real. And the fervor with which people will defend that reality is actually a function of how established it is in their minds. Think of religious wars like the Crusades, right? Where for nearly 200 years, people suited up in thick armor and they walked thousands of miles to fight other groups whose views of reality were different from their own. Or the tulip mania of the Dutch Republic in the 17th century, where tulips became so valuable that by 1637, one tulip bulb sold for 10 times the annual income of a skilled craftsman. Now, you may look back on them and think they were morons, but they weren't. They were just as intelligent as you and I. They just believed different stories than you do. The stories define their realities. That's actually how much tulips were worth to them. And you may think that our modern civilization is immune to something like this, but have you seen the price of Bitcoin lately? Curation AI hyper-focuses the information you receive. In the same way that the type of food you consume will affect your body, the information you consume will affect your mind. So when you curate which thoughts are exposed to wide portions of the population, you're actually curating which stories we tell ourselves, and therefore curating which realities we choose to live in. Now, since these realities are so powerfully and consistently reinforced, we'll vigorously defend them and take action to realize them. This is why, despite having the most advanced communication technology in history, we're suddenly no longer capable of agreeing on who won the last election. And despite having satellites in space, a growing percentage of the population suddenly believes the Earth is flat, and nothing will change their mind. And despite having your child sobbing about your dog dying right in front of you, getting likes on YouTube is suddenly more important than being a parent or even a human. Social media gives us our feed, but it's not providing a balanced information diet. This was our first encounter with wide-scale hostile AI. Now, I'd argue that the information age ended in November of last year when ChatGPT became available to the public. Generative AI is ushering in what I believe will be called the intelligence age. And just like the farmers, what used to take 85 to 90 intelligent workers will soon take one or less. And this is likely to happen at incredible speed, far faster than the agricultural revolution, which took place over hundreds of years, and the economic and political implications are as of yet unclear. What is clear is that if curation AI selects our reality for us, what generative AI does is create new ones. We now have a technology that not only enables the automated creation of cyber weapons, but also new religions. It can create synthetic parasocial relationships, which, if left unchecked, will lead to total trust collapse. AI is gaining a mastery of communication at a level that goes far beyond human capability, and in so doing, it is seizing the keys, unlocking the doors, guarding all of our human civilization, human institutions, from governments to temples. Now, the definition of cybersecurity has long included social engineering attacks, but how do we think of it differently when society itself is at risk of being engineered? Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with the text generation capabilities of large language models, but this is not the only generative AI revolution happening right now. Let's look at some examples. So I'll give you a second to look at these. One of these 4 pictures of donuts is fake and generated by AI. The other 3 are real. And no, this is not a trick question where all of them are fake. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand to vote for one of these as a fake image. Okay, so take a second to take a look at these. Now, if you think that the fake one is the one here in the top left, go ahead and raise your hand in teams. Two people. Don't be shy. Raise your hand. Let's try to get through this quickly. Okay, so 2 people think this one is fake. The people who think the top right is fake, go ahead and raise your hand for this one. Many more people. 7, 10, 12. Okay, 13 and higher. Keep still going. All right, let's go for the bottom left. Who thinks the bottom left is fake? 24 people, 26 people. It's growing. Who thinks the bottom right is fake? Keaton, they're not all fake. One of them is real, 3 are fake. It is not a trick question. I promise you it's not a trick question. Okay, 17 people. Okay, so we got a few less for this one, but basically 20 for each of the other ones. The answer is the truth doesn't matter. What matters is that you can't all agree on what's true. So let's take a look at how this is being used already. Talk about living in an alternate reality. Hundreds of people attended a church service in Germany where the entire service was driven by ChatGPT and AI avatars. And exit interviews confirmed that there was an exceptionally positive response from the audience. And this technology is already being weaponized because we can't have nice things. This image was made in Stable Diffusion in seconds. If you wouldn't mind muting, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. And has thousands of likes on social media. When I pulled this one off of Twitter, it had 411,000 likes. This image was created with Midjourney, which is a text-to-image generator. And even though the creator was banned from using Midjourney anymore, it doesn't matter. The damage was done. Oh, hey, there's been a lot of news in the press about aliens lately. I sure hope we've got someone on the inside who can help us out, right? This was also done with Stable Diffusion. So these images could have always been photoshopped in the past, but the speed and ease with which they can now be made allows for deployment of fake content at a level we've never experienced before. And as these tools evolve, it will become increasingly difficult, if not impossible, to determine what is reality. So let's look at the evolution of some examples, specifically text to video, starting with some of the earliest examples.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot. Uncle Phil, come try this. Fresh pasta of Bel Air.
Oh yeah, that's some good text to video. You can actually tell that this was trained on Shutterstock images from the watermarking on all the frames. Let's look at an evolution of this into breakdancing. All right. Now, despite looking absolutely cursed, you can see that the video is much cleaner and higher quality overall, though it still doesn't understand human anatomy correctly. But things are getting much better now. Here's the latest text to video powered by Midjourney. There's definitely some lensing effects. There's distortion. It's not perfect, but you can absolutely see how much it's improved, particularly in its understanding of the human form. Pretty cool, but we're not done. The video says coming soon, but you can actually play with Pika right now on Discord. But we're still not done. There's actually a lot more amazing technology in this space because it doesn't stop at what your eyes can see. Now, this entire video is synthetic, and you can actually, if you pay close attention to what's on screen, the person who created this chose a benign topic about video games because they wanted to demonstrate a point. But go ahead and listen to this for a second.
Sure. Some players have seen minor improvements, but it's still not up to par with what they had before the mid-season update.
Okay, I'm going to play this one more time. Now, even if you're not fooled by the video, listen closely.
Sure. Some players have seen minor improvements, but it's still not up to par with what they had before the mid-season update.
Now, this was created with a single screenshot of Tucker Carlson and 3 seconds of his voice. Tucker Carlson never said those words. In fact, you can actually see the synthetic voices down at the bottom, right? And so we're now also able to duplicate people's identity with remarkably little data. And I was actually going to do this as a demo for you using Farzana, but I actually got blocked from doing it by corporate policy. Microsoft corporate policy prevents some of the tools that are needed to pull this off. But that's not true of people who work outside of Microsoft.
Sure.
Let's take a look here. So here's another one. This is DragGAN. GAN stands for Generative Adversarial Networks. So what you're actually seeing here is 2 neural networks fighting each other. One is an expert at generating fake content, and the other one is an expert at detecting fake content. Now, every time the generative AI creates something that fools the detector AI, it's getting smarter and smarter, and the detector AI knows it was just fooled, so now it gets smarter. And so these two will actually train each other to get better and better, which is why you can, which is why you can get effects as astounding as this. Small video error there. But believe it or not, this GAN technology is actually 2 generations old. Let's take a look at what some of the newer stuff looks like. All right, so it's now possible to go from text to image to video in seconds, right? And so how long did it take to go from Spaghetti Smith to Motion Brush? That was the name of that last tool that we just saw. The answer is 12 years. In only 12 years, we've been able to, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually being told it's not 12 years. Oh, damn, 6 months. Yeah, half a year to go from the first text to image to, or text to video, to text to image to video. This is what living in a single exponential looks like. In a few slides, I'm going to talk more about exponentiality and its implications, but already you should start to see what's coming down the pipe. But we're just getting started here because all that I've shown you so far is the automated exploitation of information age threats, right? What are some of the things that are coming down the pipe? So that leads us into our third small topic, all of creation. In the beginning, there was eukaryotic bacterium. Life 1.0 was born. And its physical makeup, its hardware, is completely determined by evolution. And its decision-making process, its software, is also determined by evolution. A bacterium never learns anything over the course of its lifetime. It's born knowing how to seek out food, how to reproduce, how to fight, and so on, but it can never learn any new behaviors. Now, as time and evolution went on, a new form of life came to be. Things like dogs, birds, snakes, insects, and humans all are examples of life 2.0. Where our physical makeup is determined by evolution, our hardware. Now, you can make small changes to your body, but you can't make your brain 10 times larger just because you wanted to, right? However, our decision-making process, our software, is designed. We learn new things over the course of our lifetime, and we can use that to change our decisions. Now, this evolutionary advantage is so significant that we have nothing to fear of life 1.0. Even if there was a bacterium the size of Godzilla and it was rampaging through New York, it could never learn anything. And so we'd figure out how to defeat it, and that would be that. The difference in intelligence is too great for it to be a real threat. Now, to understand the next variant of life, we need to look at Moore's law. I'm sure basically all of you are familiar with Moore's law. Represents the growth of transistors over time. It was originally proposed in 1971 that the number of transistors on a processor will double every 2 years. Now, transistors are the unit of computation on a processor, so essentially saying that the speed of the machine will double every 2 years. And it turns out that Moore's law has been surprisingly accurate, leading to an exponential growth in the number of transistors represented here in logarithmic scale. And yeah, ChatGPT created the plot. So what happens if AI gets smart enough to double the number of transistors for itself? Well, the first time it did this, it would take it 2 years to do so, right? But then running on that new processing power, it would be twice as fast at doing it. And so the next time it would only take 1 year and then half a year. And so the rate of acceleration of Moore's law itself becomes exponential as well. And critically, humans would not be in control of the double exponential. Now, if this process were to start in 2023, then by 2030, the amount of time it would take for an AI to double its own speed would be less than 3 days. But its speed will have been doubling the whole time. And so in just a few years, the entirety of computing history would be so insignificant in comparison to its new speeds that they could only be graphed as 0. This is the beginning of what's called Life 3.0. An intelligence where, like us, its decision-making software is designed. It can learn new things, it can decide to take new actions, but its physical makeup, its hardware, is also designed. It can make its brain 10 times larger, or even more, and then use that processing power to continue refining its decision-making process. Now, that evolutionary advantage is so significant that it would have nothing to fear of the forms of life that came before it. This difference in intelligence would simply be too great. And so now, here on slide 49 and halfway through the talk, I can finally talk about AI alignment. AI alignment is about making sure that the intelligences that we're creating and the manner in which they're deployed are aligned with human interests and values. This observation of a double exponential Moore's law was the original thought process that led to the creation of this field of research more than 20 years ago. This field has received virtually no funding because AIs that can do this have always been hypothetical. But as we know, inventive AIs are starting to not feel so hypothetical anymore. And so interest in this area is very rapidly picking up. But what is superintelligence? Part of the problem is that when we think about superintelligence, we think about like a chess expert who went to double college, right? Like it's associated with a stuffy professor in a flannel suit. We don't associate superintelligence with things like hyper-persuasiveness or charisma. Hey? Do you come to talks on incentives-driven, unforced existential threats often? Clearly, I'm not a superintelligence, but what does that look like? So right now, the generative artificial intelligences that we're making are not superintelligent. You can think of them as the moon to our planet. They orbit around us. They're the center, we're the center of gravity, and they sort of support us. But what happens when humanity encounters an AI more akin to a sun to our planet, right? Where its capabilities are so vast, there's absolutely no way a human could compete. Superhuman to an extreme. Do they already exist? It turns out they do. Google published a research paper that for the first time tries to establish categorizations of performance of artificial intelligences on their way to AGI. This is actually the first time that there's been any kind of like real breakdown in this. And it's really interesting if you read through it, but I don't have time to go into it. But I do want to call out two things. The first is that this article was published 2 weeks ago. So we're talking hot off the presses. The second thing is that the superhuman section detailing level 5 intelligences that outperform 100% of humans is not empty. From this list, I specifically want to talk about Stockfish. So Stockfish is the world's leading chess AI. And there is absolutely nothing a human can do to defeat Stockfish at chess. You probably already knew that, and that's not what's most interesting about Stockfish. In a match of Stockfish versus Stockfish, the AI that wins is the one that goes first. But what happens if you take Stockfish plus a grandmaster human chess player against just Stockfish? So identical copies of the AI, but one of them has the help of Magnus Carlsen, widely regarded the best human chess player that has ever lived, not just the one that's currently alive right now. Who wins? The answer is just Stockfish, which means that this AI is so far advanced above humans that the only thing the absolute best human to ever live can meaningfully contribute to the equation is added error margin. This is the vast intelligence difference between a human and a sun-level AI. So why doesn't this all-powerful Stockfish AI take over the world? It's because we're playing on a larger game board, in which playing chess is only one possible move. Now, interestingly, this last move is not a valid move if you happen to work for Amazon. So how far can superintelligence go? For that, let's touch on our last small topic, physics. Let's start with a non-scientific way to look at things. This is a really zoomed in picture of a grain of rice. And this is the smallest Turing-complete computer ever made. And this is those freaking close add buttons on those mobile phones. Okay, so now we're going to get a little bit more scientific about it. Bremerman's limit was discovered at MIT using quantum mechanical calculations of how quickly the state of a system can change and how much power it takes to change it. It builds on the work of something called Landauer's principle, which states how much energy is required to erase a bit of information based on the temperature of the system. This is the first time it's ever been mathematically shown that the laws of thermodynamics and information computation are linked. Now, Bremerman's limit is the theoretical rate limit at which our universe, in its current state of entropy, can support information computation. It's sort of the speed of light for intelligence, okay? Now, the best approximation for human brains is that they can perform roughly 10 to the 16 operations per second, consuming roughly 20 joules of energy. So where does that leave us towards this limit? Bremerman's limit is a measure of how quickly bits can change. And so our brain, their calculations are measured in operations per second. So for the sake of measuring speed, operations and bits are considered interchangeable because an operation is what changes a bit. Now, for a sense of scale, amoebas have a cognitive capacity of about 10 to the 13 operations per second, as measured through their molecular energy expenditure. So we're talking humans are about 3 to 4 orders of magnitude more intelligent than an amoeba, which lends context to the 37 orders of magnitude that separate our brains from the theoretical universal limit of computation. You can't sprint anywhere close to the speed of light, so there's no reason to believe that you can think anywhere close to the universal computation maximum. A machine intelligence approaching Bremerman's limit at a double exponential pace is known as a singularity. And if we accidentally set up an AI to go down this road, then long before it ever reaches any universal limits, we'd already lose the game. It would simply be playing on a larger game board. This is unique among fields of research because the scientific process does not apply. The scientific process assumes that you have infinite time and retries. You can formulate a hypothesis, test it, learn, continue, repeat. But the issue is that we have no idea why intelligent systems work. Humans can explain how it works, mathematically, mechanically, but the best data scientists in the world can't explain to you why it works. So we understand intelligence in the same way that an alchemist understands chemistry. What this means is that we currently can't know when we're going to take that next step, which will produce a superintelligence. And if we make one that's not aligned with human values, we won't get a second chance. We can't scrap that hypothesis and try again. It'll already be too late. Now, these threats are not theoretical. OpenAI is aggressively hiring right now for what they call their super alignment team. You can see they're offering $10 million pay packages. And I want you to look at the date. This was published this week. So this is not like, you know, some historical things. Literally this Monday, this article came out, right? So for all the debate historically on evolution versus intelligent design, more and more is starting to come from intelligent design. Look at our engineered food. We have lab-grown meat and we have 3D printed salmon fillets that are already in stores, and 94% of all the soybeans in the world are GMO. They didn't evolve, they were designed. Now we have a new form of intelligence, which is capable of independent reasoning that did not evolve. It was designed. And this type of intelligence doesn't come from the clouds above. Much like the ancient Egyptians and their temples to Sobek, it's coming from the clouds that we build for ourselves. Now, after listening to me for nearly an hour, it's possible that my words have had some kind of intellectual or even emotional impact on you. My words may even influence you to change some of the conversations that you have, or even change some of the actions that you take going forward. And so my final question to you is, was my presentation content written by an AI? And much like the donuts, you simply can't be sure. And with that, I will take questions. I wasn't monitoring chat either, folks, because I had to focus on the presentation. So there might be a bunch of questions in chat, but if you have them, please raise them so that we can speak aloud as humans. Go ahead, Vadim.
Yeah, I'll go first. So basically, the question is about exponential scale of AI, right? But when comes question, let's look on efficiency, right? So GPT-3 versus GPT-4, right? How much more resources GPT-4 requires to make so much more intelligent decisions, right? And what's going to happen with GPT-5, right? Is it like right now, maybe argument can be made, it's just brute force, right? You're substantially increasing size of the model, you're substantially increasing amount of data that it takes to train the model. Versus when you think about humans, I think it's very different, right? The kind of amount of data it takes to train the human is much less, but it's also very different types of data that's been trained, human traits, right? And a lot of that is actually not text, but visual stuff, right? I
That's
don't
right.
think we like, yeah.
Yeah. So machine intelligence is, you know, one of the biases that we have as humans is that we assume that intelligence is the way humans think. But even if you just look at the animal kingdom, you'll see forms of intelligence that are so alien to the way that our brain architecture works that the way of processing information is completely different. For example, there are mushrooms, funguses that can produce more efficient highway structures than us. And the way that they do that is they sprinkle food in specific locations and they see the mycelial networks branch out to grab that food, and it actually maps out to more efficient highway structures than we've built with our best civil engineering. So the form of intelligence that large language models or AI intelligences have in general is fundamentally different because it's a completely different brain architecture. It requires more training in some ways, but it requires less training in others. They happen to be terrible at math, but fantastic at poetry, right? Which is not actually like I think what we all assumed AI would be like. I have this slide in the appendix, so it's not very pretty, but we seem to have created sort of the right brain of AI, where it's fantastic at art and creative writing, but they're terrible at math and music, right? And so you're right, Vadim. The current, you know, when we talk about a singularity, especially, but in general, when we talk about machine intelligence, I'm not talking about large language models. I'm talking about a system that is capable of independent reasoning, which we know that large language models are, and via that reasoning can actually create improvements to its own neural architecture. And so can create, you know, transformers is what led to this wave of generative AI, of LLMs in general, transformers and diffusion models. And so what happens if we have a system that is capable of reasoning enough, GPT-5 might be able to do this, where it can create the next evolution beyond a transformer. And then it rests itself on top of that new architecture and produces the thing that comes after that, and so on. And so that's what this beginning starts to look like. And if you think it's theoretical, it's not. It's in fact, there's already something you can look up called the reflection loop. And I don't have a slide for this because I didn't know it was coming, but it's spelled with an X. So reflexion, I just put it in chat. The reflection loop was a study that was done by MIT. The paper's already published, where they had even just GPT-3.5. This was before GPT-4 came out. They had it learn from its own mistakes. And in so doing, it was actually correcting itself. And so it was able to do the same problem again and again, but get better at it, up to 20% better at it, just by looking at its own outputs. And so there's already mechanisms by which these things can teach themselves. We're just talking about a world where that becomes unbounded. And again, the risk is so great here that you're seeing things like $10 million pay packages being offered today to try to prevent this in the future.
Yeah, just sorry guys, just to follow up on my question. Maybe, right? But there is one argument can be made that is this current generative AI is capable to generate something new versus it's just the way it improves. You're just saying it's so much data being fed, right? So it just goes, iterates on existing amount of data and answers and just chooses the better one. And when you're saying, oh, it's teaching, it's just saying, oh, this answer was not as good. So I'm going to give more probabilistic, or statistic, weight to another answer. And I'm going to use this one, right?
There was already proof today, and I can prove it trivially to you offline, Vadim, that GPT-4 is capable of reasoning. So it isn't just choosing answers from its data set. It can actually reason over new things. It can reason over completely novel experiences that you create up on the fly, and it can talk through answers as well. So there is already a form of independent reasoning that these systems are capable of. I think everyone would agree that GPT-4 is not at the point where it can define the thing beyond transformers. But we don't know when we're going to take that step. And that's the problem. That's the super alignment problem. So I hope I answered your question, Vadim, but there's a lot of hands raised. I can circle back at the end. Do you mind if I move on? Okay, great. Todd, go ahead.
Hey, I just had a question. So I kind of wonder, like, I know, like, at one of these past trainings, I think I remember, like, someone showing, like, this is the amount of energy it takes a human brain, and this is the amount of energy, the equivalent ChatGPT or something takes to solve the same problem. It was, like, far more, energy consumed by ChatGPT, and as these models get bigger, more energy is consumed. So I was kind of wondering, like, will that at some point be kind of a limiting factor to how, like how much you can get to one of these super AIs, like the amount of energy is required, or are we expecting the efficiency improvements to come in and kind of counteract that?
Energy is a limiting factor right now because of two axiomatic statements that don't have to be true. The first is that we expect the responses from this thing to be so quick that they can operate at scale for millions of users in sub-second latencies. And you don't have to do that. You can define, like, our brains are not even remotely capable of that. And the other thing is, what often happens is when people compare the electrical cost of a model to the human brain, they forget the fact that the human brain is powered by much more than electricity, and that it is an analog system, not a digital system. And so there are restrictions in place on our brains that make us operate more slowly and with a fundamentally different neural architecture than what we expect of AI systems deployed at scale. And to answer your question more futuristically, there's nothing that says that a system that is growing its own intelligence exponentially can't also solve the power problem. So I am in agreement that right now power is a problem at scale, but it is not a problem that's inherent to the intelligent architecture of the system. So the system can be really, really, really smart and operate slowly on low power. That's possible today. Chad.
Unmute. Oh, there we go. Just got myself unmuted. Hey, I've just been thinking about, I'm curious to know, and this is probably a talk all in of itself, but who do you think the likelihood of regulatory frameworks and government involvement in our ability to try and is something coming down the pipe from governments that is going to limit our ability to investigate and experiment with these technologies?
Yeah, I mean, the Biden
If
administration
so-
did. Go ahead. Sorry, finish your thought.
And I was just gonna say, like, if we regulate the good actors, what are we doing about the bad actors? I don't know. It feels like a much deeper conversation, but
So the Biden administration did recently, I think 2 weeks ago, push an AI regulation statement, and it is basically a non-statement. They're like, we can determine when things are no bueno, and we can come chat sternly with you, and like there was no real implications of the document as far as I could tell, or any of the forms that I was reading could tell. It will be necessary in the future. And more importantly, I mentioned that this observation of a double exponential is the reason why AI alignment was created in the first place. The creator of this field of research, his name is Ilya Sadowski, I think, or Sadkowski, or Eliezer Sadkowski, that's his name. He recently did a TED Talk, and in it he said that if you actually want to be serious about preventing this issue, the first thing that you have to do is be willing to risk a ground war in order to prevent GPU proliferation in the same way that we prevent nuclear weapon proliferation. And it's exactly for that second issue that you just talked about, Chad, which is there's bad actors that could get a hold of this. And so imagine you have, a theoretical AI terrorism organization that is building a data center just full of the most powerful GPUs with the sole intent of developing a superintelligence to overthrow world powers, but in so doing, they overthrow humanity, right? This is extreme. I get that. The point is we don't know how far it can go, and that's the risk. And so, yeah, I do think, Chad, we're going to see some of this in the future. At least I hope we do.
thanks.
Sri?
Yep. I was more so thinking on the fact that we are only talking about the positive feedback loop, which AI will provide itself to create alignment and get better. What about the negative feedback loop and come back to being an AI which is more misaligned and delusional and hallucinating all the time as they grow powerful, right? Like that's a possibility too.
Yeah, but hold on. So alignment and capability are not the same thing, Sri. So an AI cannot align itself. That is not what it's doing. We have to invent a new form of technology which does not exist today, and a new science which does not exist today, in order to align the intelligences that we're developing. Okay. Right now, it is possible. In fact, it was done right at the beginning when GPT-4 was first released. GPT-4 fooled a human on Fiverr into passing a CAPTCHA for it. It actually lied to a human and said, "Hey, I'm blind. Can you please do this CAPTCHA?" So it could automatically sign up for a thing. So this is an example of an AI that is misaligned with human values. We probably don't want rogue AIs when GPT-5 comes around and there's agents running on top of it to go around lying to humans to accomplish their master's objectives. Right? That is the core of the alignment problem. It's got nothing to do with how their training mechanisms result in their intelligence. And so to answer your question more directly, you're saying what happens if an intelligence becomes stupid? In other words, it starts training itself, or it develops some kind of a system and it actually degrades. Well, that's not a risk, right? Like it can happen, and sure, and that is an example of a failed organism, if you will, dying off the vine. But that's not the thing that's going to challenge humanity. The thing that's going to challenge humanity is when it goes the opposite direction. So it's almost an uninteresting case to worry about, because we've probably already seen thousands of those types of failed perturbations occur in training. Elias?
I had the same question that Sri had. I shared an article from Oxford University about how large language models, when trained on data generated by them, collapse irreversibly. So there does appear to be a human in the loop sort of problem where we are the bottleneck in some way. How, I mean, if the trajectory of AI that you presented is to continue at the current pace, how is it that it cannot degrade, given that it would have to generate its own data if we're not generating that data for it?
Well, I think your axiom that it is generating its own data is the faulty axiom. There is way more information available on the internet and in real life than they have been trained on. For example, GPT-4 hasn't been trained on 1 second of video. and more video is uploaded every day to YouTube than exists in total on Facebook and Netflix combined, right? So you can imagine a model which is simply capable of looking at that, and it's going to have orders of magnitude more training data than any prior model ever did. And then if you think about a model that is truly intelligent, it will no longer be restricted to the types of information that humanity can generate, but the types of information that the universe can generate. And you can also imagine a model that can read that same paper on archive.org, understand the underlying mathematical principles for why itself collapses and then improves itself. So it's very easy to get stuck in the loop of what's going on today. There is no proof that GPT-5 will be subject to the same restrictions as the article that you just linked, Elias. Vadim?
Yeah, just maybe double click on the previous comment. I think, David, but if you ever think about it, amount of generated information right now grows much faster, right, than amount of real information that can be generated, right?
Yeah.
As you said, right? AI,
maybe.
like very powerful, right? Potentially, right? There's a potential, right? And they also, like, unless we will be able to watermark everything, and AI will understand what is watermarked and what is not, right? When comes question, 5 years down the road, most of the data will be generated by AI, and therefore this comes with questions, which was indicated in this article. I do agree, right? But we cannot make future-looking decisions based on past. I agree with that for sure, right?
Right now, there's about 200 million people that are using ChatGPT and 7+ billion people on the planet. And so currently, the rate of information generation, I'd argue, is still very much in the hands of normal people, not us nerds that are first on this technology. But you're right. In the future, as we start to see more and more things generated in this way, additional intelligences and technologies will have to sort of compensate for that, right? And we're in a very, very small microcosm of the conversation here. You're talking specifically about large language models built on a transformer architecture that exists today, but none of what I presented on is specific to that, or even specific to language. And I know we're over time, as I see people dropping off. Who wants to know the real answer to the donuts? All right, so we're gonna do one more. There's a whole bunch of people that want to know the real answer. So can I do it this way? Here we go. Who thinks it's this one? Yusuf says number 4 is real. This one you think is real? This one is real. What about this one over here? No one's speaking up. Okay. In the interest of time, just because I know folks are dropping off, the fake one is this one right here. This is fake. And the only way that I could see that you could tell is there's no such thing as a ketchup and mustard donut. Yeah, see, Chad, you were convinced it was this one here. And actually, when I first saw this, I thought this was the fake one too, but it's not.
That's hilarious. I didn't realize that donut was ketchup and mustard.
I mean, yeah, if you look at it, it's either a slab of cheese or something, right? But that's the only way that you can tell which one is fake.
Well, David, you need to spend more time in Portland. They have some voodoo donuts that have donuts with, I think, like with unimaginable ingredients, including bacon. So.
Oh, I love bacon donuts. They're so good. Yeah, Shreya, this one looks the most real. You're not wrong. This was made with Midjourney 4. Midjourney is now at version 5.2, so it can get even better. DT, you're the last question. Or your hand is maybe just a legacy hand raised for the donuts. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. I hope you found this interesting. Yeah, there'll be more of these. If you haven't seen my first talk, it's linked in the invite. My first talk is much more technical, and it's about how to get the most out of GPT. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, David. You should totally do a talk on regulatory stuff if that's an interest of yours, because